4 o'clock on a Monday, you know what that means. It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah! This week, starring special guest star Mr. Matt Hirt. Yay! The volume is very high. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Matt.
Good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Hi, everybody.
Let me get the chat open. All right, there you guys are in the chat. So for those of you who don't know, Matt, you'd have to be a very non-participatory taxi member to not know who Matt is. He's kind of in a sense, almost like the George Washington of taxi members. He was one of the first guys who ever really figured out the film and TV thing. And although we didn't get him his first placement, we got him a lot of his earlier placements and helped him build a lot of relationships with libraries and supervisors. And what makes Matt, two things make him very special to me. And I cherish him and all he's done for Taxi's members over the years. Number one is he's got a great work ethic. He really gets it, he understands it, and he has been very successful because he works hard at it. Number two is he is really selfless and has done so much for our members over the years. I think most of you watching have probably seen the little 7-part series I did with Matt. Gosh, I don't know, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago here in the office.
7, apparently. Somebody was just mentioning it earlier. So.
And it was just, I called him up and said, hey, come over and hang out. I want to talk to you about film and TV music and videotape it, and it turned out really great. And he's inspired so many people with that. But even more than the inspiration is he's been very, very generous with what he's learned and what he knows. And I've never seen Matt ever like withhold stuff, thinking, why should I help somebody else? They could end up being my competitor someday. So he was the genesis of the vibe that you see at the Road Rally and the vibe that you see in the Taxi Forum, where people pay it forward. He was the first and best pay it forward guy, and has inspired a long line of people in his wake, and is still doing it. So all of us here at Taxi get frustrated beyond belief when we hear a great piece of music and the strings sound like a Casio from 5 years ago, or the horns sound like a Casio from gosh only knows when. And
Casio still makes stuff.
They do. Actually, they make some really good little portable keyboards that I think sound remarkably amazing, and they're like $100, $150 keyboards. So that's kind of their specialty niche, I think. But Matt did a thing with another really good friend of mine named Kevin Hu at the Road Rally, I believe 3 years ago, where I had these guys sit there and play. Okay, here's a bad sounding sample. Here's a good sounding sample from a good library, but with nothing done to it. Here it is with some stuff done to it, and here it is with all the right stuff done to it. So I've asked Matt to join us today to play this stuff. I almost don't need to be here. He's got everything on his laptop. He's going to play this stuff. Make sure the volume is up. And show you guys, get you on the path to creating better sounding strings and horns, because nothing breaks our hearts more than hearing a piece that's really well composed. Somebody understands the instrumental side of the industry, and then they blow it with a poorly articulated sample or like a DX7 horn sound, which we still hear. Sometimes we even hear Prophet 5 stuff, which we just put out a listing the other day where they actually wanted that. So for all of you Prophet 5 owners, which is probably like a plug-in now that you have to pay.
There is plugins, yeah, definitely.
Is it just me, or did Oberheim's actually sound really good?
Well, that sounded really good. And they're making stuff again.
Yeah?
Yeah, they're making hardware again.
Wow.
This hardware has had a resurgence, but it's all obviously supposed to sound like synths,
Yeah.
So they're making stuff, and everybody's out there at the NAMM show. All these old guys are there, and they make hardware again. And it's actually really cool to see them again.
And some of that stuff sounds really good. I've definitely noticed a resurgence in the old synthy sounding stuff, like in EDM, dancey stuff. What used to be considered cheesy 2 years ago is now in vogue a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Lady Gaga probably started all that.
Yep.
Some of her records have those really like sounds that one would have called dated.
Yeah.
Before her.
And she wears dresses made of meat.
That's right. That too.
So, what are you going to do first? And hello, everybody in the chat room.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, let's see. We've got Russell.
Hey, Russell.
Mary Band, Jesse, Bubbles.
I saw Pedro.
Cool, Rob Spencer. Yeah, the usual cast of characters.
I think I'm going to start with strings, and I think I'm going to... Now, I have to preface it that I don't have actually, like, Casios.
Right.
So I can't really go... I'm not going to go that bad. I'm going to assume somebody has a decent string library and just doesn't know what to do with it, because it's not expensive to buy anymore. You can get.
Let's talk about the price ranges. Like,
you know, the one that I'm going to show is actually a little pricey, but that's just because I like this one the best and I'm most used to it.
Okay.
That's $1,000. So that's a lot of money for a string library. However, there are other ones that are under 500. You know, I think the one that I like, that I would probably recommend to people who need just like entry level sort of solid, good sounding strings. And there's one called Argento. It's made by a company called ADO, and it's very affordable. I don't know the price offhand, but I know it's under 500, and it's a very good library. That it sounds very good, you know. And this one is has some things that I really like about it. The LA scoring strings, which is what I'm using on my examples. I have other stuff too, but for what I'm trying to show today, I think this one's really well suited. And it's one of the top libraries. You know, there would be a bunch more. Obviously, we can get into that later if people are interested in hearing that. But so basically, what I start with is I'm starting with something I did from scratch yesterday, and I just wanted to come up with a very simple melody on strings that that is something you would use for a drama cue or something like that. Okay. And I just make a short melody that sounds very simple and straightforward when you hear it in your head, but then when you start playing on the keyboard and phrasing it the way you think it should be phrased, it ends up not really sounding the way it would sound if you notated it and gave it to the first violin section of the LA Phil. And I mean, that's obviously a high standard, but it's what I'm getting at is like something that's very easy to do on a violin is very hard to do on a keyboard.
And it's true to say that you really need to get into the head of a string player and watch and see how they bow and listen to them and understand what they're doing so that you can manipulate the samples.
Yeah, you do. It helps a lot to see and hear at the same time. And so nowadays, of course, we've got YouTube. We can go and we can look there and we can see, a video of orchestras performing, and you can see what are they doing and how is that influencing the sound. And I think that's really very valuable. Or if you live in a town that has a symphony orchestra, you know, go see them live. I mean, I just started going to see the LA Phil this last season. I've gone to a bunch of concerts, and it's like we have probably one of the world's best concert halls here, you know, and one of the best orchestras at this point. And it's stupid not to go do it.
You're the only guy who is looking at one player with your binoculars instead.
I'm not with my binoculars, but I like to sit on the side where you like above the orchestra, and you can see down on the orchestra, and you can see like what's going on. You can actually see orchestration happening in real life. You can hear what it sounds like, and you can see who is playing to make it sound like that. You know.
Is there something to be said for understanding the map, like the bird's eye view footprint of how an orchestra is laid out so that you can emulate that in your panning?
Yeah, definitely. Although they, you know, that the standard is not as standard anymore as it used to be. For
Really?
example, LA Phil usually has the basses on the left side, where the standard is to have cellos and basses on the right side, but they have them
As
over
you're
there.
facing-
As you're facing the orchestra. So you definitely want to understand that you have to have, if you're trying to make a purely orchestral piece as opposed to adding some strings to a pop song, you definitely want to understand that the instruments are not all sitting on a line in the middle.
Right.
They're like in certain positions, and you need to sort of take care of that. And of course, a lot of libraries have that built in. A lot of libraries have that already sort of preset, so then you don't even have to do anything about it.
And he's talking about the actual sample libraries versus a production
Yes.
music library.
Exactly. Sample
So
libraries.
if you were doing, let's say, a trailer piece, an orchestral trailer piece that might even be a hybrid with some electro elements or guitar or rock stuff thrown in, and you wanted to go for a real orchestral sound, like a Hans Zimmer thing,
Yeah.
would you normally default to let me go with the footprint of a normal orchestra layout and just use that as kind of your default standard?
I probably would, yeah. I mean, I haven't really done a lot of trailers, so what I would do is what I always do some research.
Right.
And see what are the top people doing.
Yeah.
And then I would emulate that. So, I don't do a lot of trailers, so I would have to do some research and as I always do, as I do when I just did Irish music, or before I did world rap, so I listened to rap from all the different countries, and then I know what they do, and then I do it.
That is a big part of, other than his work ethic and the fact that he's just plain talented, Matt is a fanatical researcher that rather than just settling for something that sounds kind of like Celtic, they'll sit down and really listen to Celtic and I presume take notes.
Oh, yeah.
And find players that you might need, like somebody that does a tin whistle. It's like a real tin whistle guy on top of the synthy stuff to give it more authenticity.
Yeah, I actually play that myself, and I'm not super good at it, but I'm pretty good at it. So yeah. I play my own tin whistles. And I just did an Irish project, actually, with Irish vocals. And it was a mix between traditional and sort of the modern, flogging molly type stuff. And some of the people who worked with me on that are probably right there in the chat room, because it was mostly taxi people who worked on it. And so yeah, I mean, I go to the people who know what they're doing, and it's if it's acoustic based, then it's going to be acoustic based. I mean,
yeah.
It's not, I'm not gonna like try to emulate banjos and mandolins and guitars with for something like that. Do
you play any stringed instruments, or is everything keyboard that you do?
I don't play any stringed instruments. I mean, I can sort of do some basic strumming on a guitar, but it's not good enough for me to put in my own tracks. So
okay.
I always get guitar players. Now, sometimes for underscore music, I will use sample libraries for acoustic guitars, because there's some really good ones now. And they're for finger picking. There's some really good ones. Wow. I did a track recently where I had a real guitar player come over, and he said, "So who played that other guitar?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a sample," and he's like. Oh wow! So what's that library? He wanted to know. But it does. They are pretty good for some things. They're not good for other things. You need to know the difference. You need to know when you need to hire a real guy. Yeah. I can't do a Celtic fiddle with plugins. Then I hire somebody.
Let me hear something so I can see how our levels are, and we'll get that going.
I'm going to just do this first one, because I actually need to remind myself how it goes, too. So, bring that thing up there.
Oh.
What's going on?
The power was off. I'm like, wow. We had a power outage the other day, and when that happens, the stereo goes off, and then it won't go back.
Okay.
It should be on now.
There you go.
Okay.
All right. So this is the first example. It's good now. I'm reminded how it actually went. So I was just sitting around yesterday and going like, so I want to do a simple little phrase, and I I'm thinking in my head how should it go, and I thought it should go like, and then of course it would repeat, and it would build, and it would go somewhere if it was an actual piece of music. But I just took this little phrase and ended it with the final note. And so once I had in my head what it is, the way I just sort of sang it, you could kind of hear it in some places. It's short notes and slurred and all that stuff. And then I play that now on my keyboard, thinking in my head how it should sound. And then, of course, when you do that, you load up your LA scoring strings, violin 1 sample, and you play that, and then it sounds like this. So it doesn't sound terrible. It already got a good haul on it and all that stuff.
You can hear the rosin.
It doesn't sound terrible, but it on that last note, it sounds like somebody hit a buzzer. There's nothing on it. No, and then you also the short notes aren't very short, and they don't have a strong enough attack, and it just really doesn't sound like the way it would sound if you wrote this down and you gave it to a good violin player or a good section, and they would just automatically play it, and it would sound completely different from this.
Play it again, because now you've told them what to look for. Are you guys getting enough level, by the way? Let me know if I need to turn it up. Okay, so
there's basically there's two problems, and the two problems is like if you played this with a bow, you could do certain things, you could attack certain notes more strongly, or you could make a swell on that last note. You could do a bunch of things. You could do dynamics, and you could shape the attack and decay of the sound better. So those are two things. So the first thing I did is I went in and added a little bit of dynamics. You'll hear it especially on the last note. But that note has a little bit of an arc to it, the way real players would play. And you could hear that the first notes do slur. You can hear the slur there, but you can't really. The short notes just aren't, short and spirited enough, I guess I could say. And so that's the problem, is that in sample libraries, this is a legato pattern. This is meant to play like longer lines or slurred lines or long notes. It's not supposed to play the short things. And since on a keyboard we only have these keys, we don't really have a bow where we can add pressure and do all those types of things. So we have to some degree, put that together. We have to use the long articulations, and then we have to use more shorter articulations that were played more shortly, and we have to insert those where we want a short note.
And are you doing them all with a thumb wheel?
No, I would. To insert those articulations, I would use what's called key switching. So if I hit this key, like all the notes will be legato. If I hit this key, it would be short. Or another way of doing it, which is actually what I'm doing here, is I would have them on different MIDI channels.
Okay.
And I have it like that, and I'll show you why. You'll realize why I have it on different MIDI channels, because now we're gonna go move one further, and we're now gonna basically what I did is I copied this part to a part that has the short articulations, spiccato, and then I just muted where I want the long notes, I muted them on the spiccato channels, and where I wanted the short notes, I muted the long notes or muted the notes on the long note channel, right? So it's basically jumping back and forth.
So then you don't have to go through the whole piece. Let's say it's a 2.5 minute piece. You don't have to go through that and articulate each one, because every time that part comes up again, it's already on its own channel.
You could. You don't necessarily. I mean, you still have to do a lot of more tweaking, but yeah. So basically, now we hear that, and we're going to hear the improvement with it, but we're also going to hear a new problem creeping up. Now you can hear these short notes are nice and you know, articulated and very, you know, this is an articulation called spiccato, which is good for these sort of semi-soft lines, and that sounds really good. But the problem now we have is that it sounds like those short notes are played by different people. It sounds like the is played by one guy, one section, and are played by other people. They don't match very well. That's one of the biggest problems with sample libraries is articulation matching.
So play a little bit now that, again, they know what to look
so
for.
the libraries have gotten a lot better with that, with articulation matching. It used to be that it would be really terrible. Like the legato articulation sounded completely different from the short, like as if they were recorded on a different day in a different room, and you could just not make a match. And they have gotten a lot better, but it's still something you have to watch out for. So listen now and hear these beautiful short articulations and hear the long articulations, but you can hear a problem in that they don't match very well, and you can also hear that when the transition from the slurred part to the short part goes, there's some kind of weirdness happening there, you know. So and play that again. You can kind of hear them overlap. Yeah. It's almost like there's two, you know, and so that's not good. So we have a problem there. So how do you deal with that? Well, what I do is like I usually like to blend articulations rather than switch between them. So what I did is I went back and unmuted all the stuff that I muted. So now both tracks are playing at the same time.
Yeah.
And so then I use controller 11 expression, and or you could use a volume, or in some cases you could maybe you could use a fader or whatever.
Right.
And so I'm bringing down the articulation that I don't want and feature the articulation that I do want,
so that you're not getting the double.
Yeah.
effect.
So what I get in the beginning is, for example, I want a little bit of a harder attack on that first note that you would have on a normal sort of long legato note, because this is where the guy starts the phrase and goes, and he's gonna have. So I bring it up a little bit there, so the two are kind of together. But then when it goes to the two slur note, I'm gonna bring those short articulations way down so you can't really hear them, but they're still a little bit there in the background. And so when that third note, that third note that's still legato, that was always too long. So this is where I pop down the volume right there to make sure that note is now short and goes away, and the overlap is no longer there. And then on the longer notes, on the shorter notes, the articulations that are originally played when I first played it, so the ones that are on the legato patch, they're still there, but they're just at a lower level.
So you have to go note by note.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, if you want to make it sound good. So the result is this. So now it does no longer sound like there's two different orchestra or sections playing. Now it sounds kind of like, sounds pretty realistic, you know.
Sounds very realistic.
And so now basically with articulation blending, we've kind of get the best of both worlds. We get the articulations, and we get we still get sort of a cohesion together. If I had just switched, you know, if in some cases it works, but a lot of times it doesn't work. The more exposed the line is, the less will it usually work. And this, you know, may not be perfect, but it's quite good. And if you put this now in context of a track, it would you know, where you have other stuff going on, you would pretty much go like, oh, that sounds pretty believable.
And those are violas, right?
The violins.
That's violins.
Yeah, violins low in the fairly low in the range.
Okay, so now you would have to add a viola part, presumably.
What I did
cellos, you would go through the same process, but in different ways, because they're playing other parts.
In this case, I just really need, because it's such kind of a drama piece, I would add some percussion, like from Stylus RMX or something kind of modern.
Yeah.
And because I want to blend, you know, and I would certainly add like shorter strings, kind of doing a pattern. And I actually only went to the point of adding some other strings that are playing a sort of a pattern to it to put it in context. And of course, if I made a whole real piece out of it, there would be a lot more stuff going on. But I just wanted to show a little bit of context with this melody that we have now, with articulation blend melody, and some other context where I added violas and some cellos and a double basses to it, and then it sounds kind of like that. And then you hear that final note. They're all the only place where I switch to long note on this one is on that final note. The other ones are all the short articulations by themselves, not blended.
Right.
So because there was no reason. You really only need to blend them if you have a line. Because if you're just going to do a bunch of short articulations, they sound fine by themselves.
And on the final note, it didn't all die together. It sounded human.
Yeah, it sounds a little human, you know. I mean, but you can hear that final note sounds really nice, and you know the way a real orchestra would play it. So that's kind of how that is. And so there's only one more trick that I want to show with this little example, and that is sometimes if you can't get the line to sound realistic enough with your strings for some reason, and you just go like, it just sounds still like a little bit like it's cobbled together. It doesn't quite flow. Even though I did articulation blending, it just doesn't. Then there's another trick, and you can double it with something else.
Another library.
You can double it with another library. That's a possibility. But what I also like to do is double it with non-strings. I would double it like with this line, for example, with a clarinet. You could double this line with clarinet, and if you have a really good clarinet, you know, I have a sample modeling clarinet, and I play it with a breath controller, and it sounds pretty damn amazing. And I don't want to make this like a clarinet piece, but if I put that in there and I put it under the strings, you're not even really going to hear that there's a clarinet in there, but the line is just going to sound a little bit more eloquent and a little smoother. So what I did here is I did that. I put a clarinet in, and I also put a flute in an octave higher, playing the same melody. And quite soft. The flute is really, you're not really supposed to hear it even. It's just supposed to give a little bit more lift to the line, so it's kind of comes out a little bit more. And you know, one of the really interesting things is when you look at for example, John Williams scores, there's a lot of places where you think, oh, it's a pure string orchestra, but it's never pure string orchestra. There's always woodwinds in there. Sometimes the big thing from Jurassic Park, you know, like in the beginning where it goes, like a really full string sound, like really low, and you go like, what the hell is going on there? And you look at it, and he's got his violas in divisi, so they're playing different parts, and cellos, and everything is doubled by 4 French horns. And you can't hear the French horns really, like it just sounds so beautiful and warm. And so this is what doubling does. You know, you can really do something. It can still sound like strings. It's not supposed to sound like, oh, there's a clarinet, oh, there's a French horn. But if you blend it right, you can just get a more fuller and more realistic sound.
It's like harmonic distortion coming off a tube.
Yeah,
you know? It's part of the. It's all those little components that you really don't hear.
And then the other thing too is of course when you add other instruments playing the same line, I don't copy that line. I play it again. So now I've got a little human variations going on in there, and so that just adds a little bit more. So I'm going to just play this piece that I just played in context with the added woodwinds, and then I'm going to play the melody with the woodwinds. Just the melody, so you can hear the woodwinds a little bit better. So this is just now, actually, let me play the one that I just played so I can hear the difference. So this is just with the strings. And now we have added clarinet and octave up flute, and you're not going to hear it very well, but you're going to hear a little bit, hopefully, of a... has a little bit more of a human element in there, and this is what that line sounds, just a line. So that's kind of my so that's a way of using articulations to make lines that, and as you said, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, how much work is it? Let's call it let's say it's a 3-minute piece. How long might you spend getting all this stuff right?
Well, it's very difficult to say how long it would take, because if for a piece like this, it's not going to have this melody going through the whole thing, and there's something else might come in, and so I can't really say how long it would take to do it. But if you're going to do a big full orchestration with like themes jumping from section to section, you're talking about a significant amount of work. I mean, if you're full on doing it, I'd say at least a couple days, for to make it sound really good. And if you can always spend more time and make it sound better too,
Our buddy Kevin, who has told me that I remember once he played me a piece I was blown away by, and he said, I need to make the articulations better. And he spent another 48 hours, well, it took him 48 hours to get me the piece, but it was probably 12 to 18-hour days knowing him, because he's fanatical like you are. He wants everything he does to sound incredibly good so that people think of him as being incredibly good.
Right. Oh, yeah,
versus that's good enough.
That is a good way of obviously making a reputation for yourself. You don't really want to necessarily have the reputation of being the person who can write the most tunes in the fastest amount. Right. So anyway, so this is kind of a very basic idea of that dealt with articulations in strings, and of course articulations exist in other instruments too. I think that when with solo instruments like solo woodwinds and solo brass, there's a new technology that has kind of come on that makes things a little bit more human and a little bit more more playable, and we're gonna talk about that when we get to the brass. Okay. But in with strings, it's still there's a lot of work, and that like Kevin would have probably added, and I might too if I had more time, might have added even another string library from a different sample library to this line, and then that would have smoothed it out even further, because then of course those have different the same articulations are different, you know.
And I know Kevin for a fact will bring in 2 or 3 real string players.
Oh yeah, I mean if you put real string players on top, it's game over.
Yeah, and people might laugh, but it's 3 people. He's converted a garage into a studio. Right. It's not like he's got some big room that he works in. And take a 414 or something and put it 2 or 3 feet over 3 string players. Might even put it in Omni just to get the sound of the room, and just one pass of that doubled on top of something like this, and you're only sneaking in 10% of it.
Exactly. That you're not really concerned about the sound of that recording in terms of does it sound like it was recorded in Disney Hall? Right. No, you are trying to get the thing that you're not getting from the samples, and that's that
the humanity,
the flow. It's really a flow. It's like a flow of what we're doing basically, and what I was trying to do with articulation blending is to preserve that flow more than if you just switch between articulations. And of course, articulation blending is not realistic. Like in real life, you have not half of the string players playing like short and other ones long. They play, this is artificial. It's just a trick to make the sample sound more real.
It works.
But yeah, I mean, if you bring in real players on top of it, then you will get that flow that it's like they actually, I think the main thing to remember is the reason we have to do that with samples, because when these guys were recording these string sounds that we're working with, they were sitting there and they go, they were not playing music.
Right.
There's no flow between those notes because those notes are not musically related.
Yeah.
They were just played in isolation, and so we have to use tricks to add flow to it, you know. And
Yeah,
that's,
and they couldn't build that in because they could never know what
no,
passing
there's
tones
no
they
way
would
of
need. Yeah.
there's no way of doing it. There's a library now that tried to sort of do that a little bit by basically telling people, you know, when you're playing this like auto transitions from da 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 da, because those are recorded too, and then they cut out the little transition part, and Contact inserts that. When you play this, it inserts a little tiny transition from that, and when you play this, it inserts the little tiny transition of those in real time. So that's pretty remarkable that it can do that. But so when they were doing those like auto transition on this library, they said, you know, we want to play like think that you're playing Schindler's List, or they were mentioning like specific soundtracks. There were that kind of sound. Of course, you also get different type of vibratos and things like that too. And so it does work sometimes, not always.
You could never anticipate every possible way. Yeah.
No, you can't. But you can. It does work in some ways at something. So you know, there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and so. But getting back to what we're doing here. Now I've got another track, another string thing, and basically what I did with this is it's more about expression. It's not so much about articulations, because they're all long lines. They're all kind of held notes, and I'm trying to bring out the dynamics, to bring that sort of live into it, where. You know, that makes it sound like there's actually a bunch of people there playing music, as opposed to
given the definition, but what's the difference between expression and articulation?
Well, articulations is you know, articulations are is it played like auto? Is it played marcato? Is it played spiccato, like the really short one? Staccato? Is it played? So basically, in some ways, individual envelopes of individual note events, right? So is this note, does it have a hard attack and is it short? Or does it have a soft attack and is long? That would be articulations. Pizzicato is an articulation. You're not plucking instead of bowing, right? So those are articulations. When when I'm talking about expression, I'm talking about how does the whole line evolve? Like, this is all legato, but there's expression in it. It's different than if I play da 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 da. I have no flow there.
So how would a real player play that with the bow?
With
in
expression,
the hand?
bow pressure.
Okay.
Bow pressure, like, and you can see it when you see them play, and they dig in, or the cello players, you know, like lean, and you can see it in bow, and that's like it's super useful for that, for expression, to watch real players and hear the sound and see what they do to get the sound. And then you can imagine in your head, while you're playing the line, instead of sitting in front of the keyboard playing the line, you imagine in your head the player that's playing this line on their instrument. You see it in your mind's eye, and you try to do that justice.
One of the greatest primers for people to understand the functions of orchestral players within the whole, I swear, is the 1950s recording of Peter and the Wolf.
Oh yeah, that's really good. Those are really good.
I listened to that 1,000 times when I was a kid. I think one of my aunts or uncles or somebody.
It was one of that I listen all the time too.
Yeah, and it helps you.
It's a good story too.
Yeah, it is. So it really helps you understand what the players do to bring the music to life.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of articulation. Anyway.
Yeah, an expression like in the end, and then French horns, and that gets louder, and you go, I can't get any more louder, but it still gets louder, you know. So anyway, so here we have a little piece now. I don't know. I've got a context. This is taken from one of my pieces. I have a little context example that shows the final result, and then I have sort of the strings from bad to better to best. So should I first play the whole thing so we get an idea what this is all about?
I think that would work.
All right. So this is called Floating Clouds. or just a part of it. It's not the whole thing. So then it keeps on going on forever and ever. But basically you can hear there's arcs. You can hear melodic arcs, and the strings, the piano obviously has dynamics in it, but the strings support that. It goes da, 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 you know, like there's arcs, and those you have to put in. They don't just happen.
Right,
you know?
because it'd just be a straight note.
Yeah, exactly. So if we have the strings now, what I did here too on this is I started with really bad. I started with no expression, and I also made them very dry, because some string libraries comes really dry, and you never really hear a string section play in a dry environment. You always hear them in some kind of concert hall or something like that. So it's part of the sound. Mm-hmm. So if it sounds like this, it's not completely dry, I don't think, but quite dry. You hear some good samples, you know, but like up in that higher range, they sound really shimmery, but it's there's no dynamics to it, and they're very dry. They're like really close behind us here. And now when you hear the line, same deal. The cello is just playing like once, right? The real cello player couldn't even do that. They couldn't even do that. It would be so totally against their. So if you play this on a cello, if you give this to even like a child that has played cello for, let's say, 3 years, if you give this notes to the cello player to play that line, they won't be able to play it like this.
Right.
It's not really possible on the instrument, because the bow has a certain length, right? And it's also just against. It just goes against the instrument. But if you play this on a keyboard, this is the default way it's going to sound. So this is the problem, right? Is that what we get when we play a sample library, the default that we get is nothing like the default you would get if you played on a real instrument.
And what this causes is we get members who submit material and they say, "Oh, I used LA scoring strings. I use the same samples that this guy or that guy uses." But the screeners sometimes will say, that sounds like a synthesizer. Mm-hmm. And it's because of that.
It's because of that. Because it sounds like, strings can sound remarkably like an organ if you play them like an organ. If you play like this if you play this kind of chord and down here like that, the way you would play it on an organ, well, it's not going to really sound like strings.
So you're better off with a less expensive library and knowing how the dynamics and articulations and expression than having an expensive library and even playing the wrong triad. And,
there were guys that did stuff back on synths, like on model or Moog synths, that sounded pretty remarkably like real orchestras, because it was all like done with a crap load of expression, and they were listening to what they're trying to emulate and make it as real as possible. And so absolutely, if you know what you're doing and you really put in those articulations, you put in the emotion, the expression, you end up with something much better, even if the library you have is not as good.
You can
spend $1,000 and still make it sound like crap.
Same thing is true for drums.
Oh, yeah.
You take a $200 drum set with Steve Gadd, it's going to sound like $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
If you take a $20,000 drum set with me, it's going to sound like a $200 drum set.
Right. Yes, absolutely. That's true too. That's true to
Or
some
worse.
degree with other instruments too. So we have the problem here that we had, and the problem was, okay, there's no expression, and we had another problem, and it's so dry. So what I did, I think first, I just added some real nice ambience to it. So there's still no real expression in it, but it already sounds way better.
What did you use for the ambience?
Good God, I don't know. Probably convolution that's built into this library.
Okay.
This library comes with presets that are named after film scores.
And
so they use the convolution reverb that's built into Contact, in which it runs to shape the sound of the library and the ambience to sound like, Road to Perdition or whatever. So it already sounds much friendlier, even though I haven't done anything other than put a good ambience on it.
It's still the endless bow.
Still, yeah, and you can hear it. Yeah, you can hear it very well on some notes. And so here now we put some expression into this. Start soft in the notes and then they go back down, And now the arc gets longer because of the melodic. So you want it to peak basically while you're at the top of the line. And then kind of go back down a little.
Creates emotion.
Yeah, exactly. And we put it one more time in the context of the entire thing. You can hear it very well with the piano because the piano has a natural decay. So if you have the strings sustaining at full level, it would sound like, They die out right when he plays a little pickup. I'm talking about myself, the third person. So yeah, so that's kind of the...
Yay. Now those are real hand claps. Emotionally, it's amazing. I mean, how many notes are in that thing, in the melody?
You mean the beginning?
Yeah, in the main...
Not a lot. It's pentatonic. And then it does something when it comes up. The line is a little... like up to a 6,
And it's all immediately... It's got a hint of introspection. It's wistful and it's hopeful. It's all of those things, yet it's very simple.
Yeah, it is very simple. I mean, most of my stuff is pretty simple, and I'm a lot of times I come up with something for whatever reason, and the hardest thing is finding a good title. And this one I call it Floating Clouds because I'm imagining like I'm looking at the clouds, and it's exactly what you said. It's emotionally somewhat neutral. It's not really either super happy or super sad. But it's kind of reflective, I guess. Right?
Yeah, almost has a hint of cherry blossoms.
Yeah,
it's almost Asian.
It is because it has those almost Debussy-esque open fourth up in the high strings. You know, but
I
he
was
did a
gonna
lot
say
of that.
that.
He did a lot of that sort of stuff that has a sort of an open fourth. Always sounds oriental. You know.
I wouldn't know, but I'm glad it
So
was a decent guess on my
it was a
part.
good guess.
Somebody asked which library again that you're using on everything that they've heard so far.
LA scoring strings.
Two or one? Because somebody had a
Um,
two in there.
but, I guess two.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have the latest update, but I think it is the one that has all the bells and whistles with ARC and everything. So it's not the one that first came out, and it's not 1.5. I think it's 2. It's very, very good. And they did a lot of amazing stuff on that library. It was already good when it came out, but they added so much interesting stuff to it. It's fantastic. For example, you can... one of the things that these guys did that's actually interesting is the problem with string samples is like there's, in a normal violin section, there's usually between about 15 and 25 people.
Mm-hmm.
And they all play music together. And which means even if they try to play the melody exactly the same way, they
Right.
don't, because there's 25 different interpretations of that melody. Even the concertmaster is like a real, Hitler, and
yeah.
tells them like, no, you got to play it exactly like me. They can't. And so every time, every note, every time they play it is a little bit different. Well, how do you capture that with samples? Like you
Yeah.
record 23 people at the same time playing E. Well, every time you hit that E, it's going to be the same E and the same little discrepancies.
So what did they do?
And what these guys did is they said, how about we break this down and we say we're going to record the concertmaster by himself, and then we're going to record an ensemble of four players that are sitting in the front row, and then we record an ensemble of the 4 players that sitting in the second row, and then we record an ensemble of 8 guys that are sitting in the back rows. And then, so they sampled everything
Yeah.
that many times. And then when you have the full library, those are all separate, but they play at the same time. So the way it's done in the software is that when you hit the one note, all of those things play at the same time and are blended already by the company, but as a preset together the way it sounds the best. And so now when you move from note to note, you have those little timing discrepancies, and you can also, of course, record each line separately with each of those subsections, right? And then
you're doubling up on that inconsistency.
You get more of that. Yes,
humanity.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Also, I noticed with the tuning,
yes,
there were natural tuning deficiencies that made it sound very realistic.
Exactly.
Do you add anything? Do you alter your tuning in any way, shape, or form?
In this case, I didn't. In this case, I didn't. You can do a lot with this library. I mean, you can control how much each of these sections should drift and all kinds of overtime or on the tack, and there's a lot of stuff. But no, I just use a preset.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons I think the library sounds so good is that it has that approach. And then, of course, it's also very flexible because you can have a smaller section. If you want to just have 4 violins play, well, then just use the small sections. If you want more of a chamber arrangement.
I would think that's even harder, though, because there's less, anytime you're dealing with a small quantity of people, a small number of musicians, they're more naked.
Right.
And the bad stuff is going to be easier to hear, whereas with this, the more layers you have. But I think the most important takeaway is the articulation and expression that you could add 10 layers of people with a 20-foot bow, and it's going to sound like 10 layers of people with
Absolutely.
a 20-foot bow.
It has to have the emotion in it, and it has to really, you have to really, like I said, remember, like I don't know if you heard it, I said, and you can hear how the violins fade out while he's playing the pickup, and the pickup was the piano.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I played it. But I think that way. I think about individual players. I think about this, the piano player is doing this, and over here, this woman is playing the solo cello. I'm not thinking of, I'm sitting here recording everything. I'm thinking of, like, as if it's actually a group of people.
So, Jim,
in my head,
I don't want to discourage anybody, but I think that, this is stuff that I've known you for probably close to 15, 20 years now. some long period of time like that and have watched you get better and better and better. This isn't something that somebody's going to learn in 6 months.
No, not usually. Although, of course, you have YouTube now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that have YouTube channels that are teaching you things there, and you can learn a lot faster now. There's orchestration courses online for free. There's there's a lot that you can learn more easily and more quickly now. And of course, you have almost unlimited amount of music recordings, live recordings that you can watch on YouTube. I mean, any ensemble that you might possibly want, you can see there, and you can see them play, and you can see that connection between what it sounds like and what they do, which is, to me, I think the thing that really helps, because you really have to think about the instrumentalists when you are playing. You are not just like sitting here, and I think you have to think of yourself less like the conductor and more like as if there was an orchestra of clones of you, and you played each instrument. So you have to think about, or in my case, I like to think of them as being actual other people. You know?
I
put myself in their shoes.
Watching those videos with headphones on and just focusing in, would be amazing.
And even more amazing, like I said, I mean, if you're in LA, go see the LA Phil. I mean, you don't even have to buy expensive tickets. You can get the tickets that are behind the orchestra, high up. You can see everything that's going on, and they're not expensive. And like, if you see that, if you go to a piece that has really good orchestration, and you sit in a place where you can see the orchestra really, really well, you can actually see how orchestration happens. Like, what is the sound? Oh, it's the bass clarinet playing with da-da-da, with this and that. And then another thing I saw that was really interesting that I never thought before of, in a Mussorgsky piece that I saw on there with my friend Volker. We saw the LA Phil doing the Ravel orchestration of Picture at an Exhibition by Mussorgsky. And Ravel, of course, is the genius of orchestration. He's one of the best orchestrators. And so this is originally a piece for piano. And so he orchestrates it for orchestra. And it's just awesome what he did. And one of the things he did, like, he's got this, like, dum, 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 low-end thing going on. And he did something like, he did it in one direction, had him do pizzicato, and on the other direction had them do a staccato with the bow. So they have the bow in their hand, they go, dum, dum, and it's such a cool sound, and I never thought about using that ever. I didn't even think that could be done. And then you see it, and you go like, oh, I'm going to use that on my next so-and-so piece.
Sound like a genius. Okay, what's next?
Brass.
All right. Want to do the same side? You know what? How are we doing on time? Shoot, we've only got a half an hour left.
How long have we been going?
Well, we've been going for an hour.
Oh, okay.
And we can run over a little bit.
Well, halftime, it's up to you and, up to you, I guess.
Well, it's up to how long can we keep them entertained and educated.
Well, yeah, if you
as
see
long as they're
people go away, then...
Right. Okay. You know what? Let's do the brass and then take some questions at the end.
Okay. So, brass. So, brass, obviously, here's the thing with brass, right? You can do all kinds of different things with brass. You can do like orchestral type thing, or you could do something that's more modern, like soul or funk or and so what I wanted to do is I showed two different styles, because some of the same things apply to everything, but then there's also some things that are different. And so what I did is I have this piece that I wrote quite a long time ago, actually, and it is a piece that's kind of like news, Eye on the World, I called it. And so it's kind of like a news piece, and it's got a lot of brass and strings and all kinds of stuff in it. And I'm basically just playing the piece, or the excerpt from the piece first, again, so that you guys can hear what the piece is and what the context is. And then we're going to look at the brass, and you're going to see what was done to make the brass sound the way it sounds. And I can maybe talk a little bit about what brass I was using. So here's what I got. this keeps going for about 3 minutes. So.
Great piece.
But so that's the basic gist of it, and you can hear obviously there's a lot of orchestration in there. But the brass consists of trumpet playing a kind of a solo part over the top in the first section, and then a lot of French horns come in, and they play sort of the meat of the part, the harmonic parts. And there's some trombones down the low, and I don't think I have any tuba in there. But basically, I didn't get to this just by playing on the keyboard. So I had to do some stuff. So if I just played it on the keyboard and I didn't think of articulations and things like that, it would kind of sound like that. Oh yeah, French horn's doubling the trumpet. I forgot about that. You can hear it kind of falling apart here because the rogue articulations are playing, or no articulations are playing. So there's no build there in the end, the line.
It sounds like a little synthy.
Yeah, it sounds a little synthy, even though this is probably the best kind of sounds, especially on the trumpets, is the best trumpet that's available. It's a sample modeling trumpet. You can hear the individual notes sound quite good, and you can hear the legato transition sounds like a real legato because it is. But the trumpet player would just not. He wouldn't even be able to hold the note like that, because you have to breathe at some point, and you kind of run out a little gas towards the end of the long note, so you get a little softer. You don't play like that. I mean, nobody plays like that. And so I think what I did on this, I think this first one actually also had some not like short articulations when they were supposed to be in the horns. So I think in this next one, it's still fairly without a lot of expression, but with the right articulations. Yeah, I didn't even go through the whole trumpet part. It's much more cohesive now on those chords. So it's better, but still the trumpet player is, not a real person.
Yeah, at some moments it sounds very real and impressive. Other moments you go, oh, that's a little synthy.
And so now we're going to hear it with some expression in. And so it's going to start from the beginning with the solo trumpet, so playing over the top of that French horn. And you can hear now, this is the kind of thing where a trumpet player would put a little vibrato in. Trumpet players in orchestral settings don't use vibrato a lot. But on long lines like that, they would put a little bit in. And they would also obviously, have an arc to what they're doing. There's something, the guy is actually playing music.
Would the vibrato be written in for them, or they just do it naturally?
They would do it naturally. The guys I don't think it would be written in. I mean, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
You just hear it from where it needs it because, you've been recording for John Williams for 25 years. Yeah. So, or whatever. I mean, those guys that play this shit in LA, I mean, they're like incredible. So here's the same thing now. You can also hear some swells on the horns. Mm-hmm. Those are this build. So, you know, so that's what the difference is. And by the way, those swells, there's little swells on those French horns. And of course, I couldn't, at the time, I didn't have the best French horns. So I couldn't do that. So what I did is I put like a short articulation, and then I layered the swell under it. And so when you actually hear it soloed like that, it doesn't really sound 100% realistic. But when you hear it in context, you can't tell that's you know layer on top of one another. It just sounds more realistic because they would swell there, you know. Yeah. So here's what we're gonna hear them. I guess one more time the whole thing put together. Also, the vibrato sounds really good in context. You hear those little swells come in right at the right point. So wow. That's
it's a great piece.
Now, yeah, I was studying some John Williams scores before I did that, and I lifted some of his little tricks, his little orchestration tricks. And anyway, so what I'm using on this was on quite a long time ago. So I have now different.
How long ago is?
Well, it must have been. It must be about 3 years ago because you said we did that thing.
Oh, okay. So this is for the rally, yeah.
Something like that. Something.
Yeah, 3 years.
So the trumpet, I still use the same trumpet. It is a sample modeling trumpet. I think the French horns were Westgate audio, and I still use those because they have super tight staccato articulations. There's nothing that has, and they're so consistent. So if you want to do like one of the type of thing, sounds the best with Westgate. Nothing else can that I've heard so far can do it. And so I like those Westgates for that. I would still use them for that. I would not use them for solo horn line. Which I think actually is the old East West that I probably used for that solo horn. So not the Hollywood brass, but the old East West Gold library, which is probably the library that I got the most mileage out of.
That was like 7 years ago.
Much longer.
Really?
Much longer. Yeah. This is very, very old. Very, very old, but still some good stuff in it. I still use some of it. But I would now probably use the sample modeling French horn that came out to put that line that's under the trumpet. And I would probably use sample modeling trombones instead of which is probably also East-West Gold. So you know, now sample modeling is kind of the king when it comes to solo brass, and it's the king when it comes to solo woodwinds because they have they have a new system. It's a system that's between samples and physically modeled. Basically, what they do is they record the samples at different velocity, different loudness ranges, different dynamics, and they found a way to phase align those with one another so that the waveforms are all these different dynamic levels are phase aligned. So when you crossfade between them, it doesn't sound like two instruments playing at the same time. It just sounds like one guy getting louder. And so that technology was invented by some Italian cardiologist. I know, and it's just the best stuff. And then he hooked up with Peter Seidlicek, who's a Czech guy who's been doing sample libraries really for a very, very long time. And so these guys have come out with these amazing brass and woodwinds. They also have double reeds. They have clarinets, bass clarinet. They have flute. So those are the best things in my opinion because they just play, they're more like an instrument that you play. And this sample modeling trumpet, what's unusual about it too, it can play this type of legit stuff, but you can also play like funny trumpet, comedy trumpet. It can
Right.
also play like a Miles Davis type muted trumpet. You can play different styles. You'll hear the same trumpet playing on the next contemporary arrangement type thing. So you could never use that with samples before. They had to be specifically tailored towards
Right.
a specific style of music. So this is really breakthrough stuff.
And how much does this cost?
They sell them. I think they sell them as individual instruments, but they also sell bundles. I'm honestly not 100% sure, but usually the price of an individual instrument is around $150 or something.
It's not bad.
No, not bad at all. And when you buy bundles, you get more.
Right.
You get discounts, and they're just amazing. I mean, they really are, because you can actually play this from the keyboard, and it's already going to sound way better than traditional samples. And what I did is actually get a breath controller. So because I'm a brass player, so I play the trumpet and I play also like some woodwinds. So I actually use a breath controller to run these, and that makes them even better. So I think there's nothing better for brass and woodwinds. There's other good stuff, but I don't think this stuff.
Who's the guy? A taxi member, Jim. I want to say Jim Steinberg, Jim Steinman. Yeah, blanking on his name, but he had a brass library last year at the Road Rally, and he did a taxi TV with me.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm not a player and I don't use this stuff, I've got to say it was amazing.
I've heard of stuff and I've used it, and it's good for some things.
Yeah.
Especially if you need like big band high screaming stuff.
Right.
This can't really do that because they didn't go up to that range. But the problem with that I've found with his library is that it still feels a lot more like you're stitching stuff together. Like, and here I need the staccato note, and here I need this, and here, and I think he even step enters his stuff, if I'm not mistaken. So for him, it's probably not an issue because he's not actually playing it; he's entering it into the sequencer. Yes. But for me, I want to be playing it, and I want to, use my breath controller, and I want to get as close as possible by just playing it, and then go tweak. I don't want to sit there like a surgeon,
He did. I remember when he was on Taxi TV, he played one piece that was a solo trumpet piece that was mind blowing, and it was all MIDI programmed and really, really good. I'm amazed at how good the technology is.
Oh, it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah,
it's gotten a lot better for sure.
All right, so tell us about or play the other piece, the one we're moving on to now.
So this piece I'm kind of doing something modern, and what I did some years ago is I did reggae, contributed to a reggae album, and so I did this track, and it has reggae brass on it. So it's got trumpet, got trombone, it got some saxes in there, and so it's doing the kind of a
raggedy brass.
Not that bad. They're good.
Okay. So what would differentiate it? What were you looking for?
What's different is it's obviously a whole different arrangement, a whole different kind of playing. There's more of a vibrato. There's little, embellishments. There's different types of swells that you would do in a legit situation. I mean, it's just different playing. And there's on the trombones, there's a lot of little bends. Right. When they slide into stuff. You don't really do that normally in classical music.
Right.
It's frowned upon,
So yeah, like I said, raggedy brass. So now, but it's the same stuff, same library.
On this one, I think I use a sample modeling trombone because I haven't gotten it at the point, I believe, and I'm using the sample modeling trumpet for sure for the trumpet, and the saxes, I'm actually not sure what I used on the saxes, because the saxes, I think it's just a tenor that's in there, and it's just kind of in the middle, it's not playing anything really important, so it might have even been from the Contact Factory library, possibly. I would have to look that up. But so here's basically just the context of the whole piece. And you can kind of hear this arrangement and the guy singing, and this guy is from Jamaica.
In the streets now. Jah will protect.
So that's that.
Totally different.
Yeah, totally different, obviously. And so on this one, I have the bad brass and the good brass. And then on the trombone, I have 3 levels because trombone I did the most work to it because it's playing the most. I guess I just needed the most work for some reason. I don't know. So here's the bad brass. See, they're not phrasing it correctly. Bad, bad, bad. They would play like bad, bad, bad. Not smooth. Too staccato. So you're not playing like that.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a brass player, you don't. So basically, on this one, the note sounds all good.
Yeah.
It just has no human touch to it, and they're not articulating the way players that blow into an instrument will articulate.
Which breath controller do you use, by the way?
I just used the only one I think that's on the market now.
The Yamaha?
Yamaha doesn't make them anymore.
Oh, really?
There's a USB breath controller, and it's made by a company called Tech something or other. And it's Tech, and I think something behind, but I don't know what it is right now. But somebody will know it on there.
Yep.
And it is USB, and it's made by a company in Sweden. It costs about $100. And you just plug it into your USB port on your computer, and it just has a tube attached to it. And then on the other side, it has like various little mouthpieces. And also, you can get like a sort of a headset, which you can put around your head as an accessory. But it's all like kind of dorky and handmade, but it works super. I mean, it's awesome. You know, I love that thing.
You have to remember to take it off if your next door neighbor comes over to borrow a cup of sugar. Take it off before you answer the door.
Yeah. Well, I don't, but if people cared about that, that's my. So anyway, but I didn't use that on this.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just saying that, but that's what I like to use now because I get the good result faster because I can actually shape with my breath the way I would on the real trumpet. I can shape the notes already. And so the editing that I have to do later is much less. You know.
You went to Dick Grove School of Music, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day?
Yes.
And were you were a trumpet major?
No. I was an engineering
okay.
engineering major. The trumpet, I played trumpet a lot back in Switzerland in some orchestras and ensembles and stuff. I have it here and I played sometimes, but now I mostly take it out if I have to do like banda or mariachi where it's supposed to sound kind of crappy, you know, because I would have to practice a lot to get to sound really legit, you know.
Right.
It's a difficult instrument. Anyway, so this is the bad, and so now we just have the best. So basically, I didn't do an intermediary step because there really isn't one. So now you'll hear these. This is properly articulated, has some expression on the long notes. It's played the way the real people would play it. Where do they reattack? Or where do they just slur it? You know, that's just, you know. Da, right? That's how you would play it. And you get a little whoop here, you know, you put that little. That's a little down. I just should have fixed that. This one is good because it's a little off when he hits the high note. Vibrato in those long notes. I guess that's it. So yeah, but you can hear like there's one note in there that I should have fixed. That's too sticks out too much.
Yeah.
But on the high note, it's like he's sliding into it a little bit. The same way you would you go like, is this the high F or am I? You know,
I got to say, even that note being too strident to me, I liked it because it added humanity.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it, you know.
Yeah, it just would bother me. But now it does, but only if I solo it, obviously.
I used to be very fortunate back in my engineering days in Miami. The guys who played brass on all the Bee Gees records were readily available to us because it was a guy named Whit Seidner, who was a brass teacher at the University of Miami, a great jazz band, U of M. And I would record those guys on a regular basis. As I was listening to this, I was thinking, okay, I'm in a session with Whit Seidner and the boys and soloing them and listening, and that was pretty freaking
It is
close.
pretty, and you can get pretty close to the sound. Yeah, it is actually, pretty remarkable. And so now on the trombone, just because there were several steps that I guess that I took on the trombones. I have a bad, better, and best example here. So this suffers from the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear he slurs, that's fine. This is actually pretty good. But these are too short. And straight, there's no swells in them. So on this one, the better one, I'm assuming I put some dynamics in. So let's hear that, if that's what I did. I think so, that's what I did. Oh, yeah, better phrasing. Little.
Mm-hmm. Very human.
A little flat there. So actually, I think I lied. I didn't put dynamics in, but I put the proper phrasing in it. So I put a little bit of bends in a few places.
And you did that with the wind controller?
No, this was not done with the wind controller. This was done with a keyboard.
Wow.
So the little pitch benders, you know, and the rest is just the way the sample modeling works. If you overlap notes, it will give you a legato, and if you don't overlap them, it'll give you like detached.
I call them burps and farts,
and by the way,
they sounded great.
And by the way, too, if you play a legato like da da, if you hit the second note hard, you get the proper legato da da. Like on a trombone, it would be like this. But if you go da and you hit this soft, it won't be low and level, but it'll be a slower transition. Da, you know. So you can so you have obviously have a crap load of expressive possibilities.
So you really have to think about, again, putting yourself in the shoes of the player. What would you be doing?
Yeah. And then on, I guess this last one, I just have more. I have more expression, like more swells and stuff like that on it. Yeah. See, now it's more. So, you know, it sounds like the bell tones that my trombone or my brass band teacher would always say. Vibrato. And, you know, the brass, like, especially on the trombones, I remember we had a brass band teacher, he was the trombone teacher, and he would always say, like, bell tones, because you have, like, bow, kind of a thing a lot on the brass instruments. So it kind of starts with a little bit of a attack, and then it kind of fades off a little bit. And you can really hear that on these first notes, I think, really well. Boom, boom, boom. So that's like, you know, the kind of thing that I think, of course, I have an advantage that I played in brass bands and I play trumpet, and so I know these things. I know what it's supposed to sound like, and it's a lot easier to get it to to where what it's supposed to sound like if you know what it's supposed to sound like.
But with today, you know, with YouTube, you could study this. You can.
You
I mean, there's so
can.
many records that have been deconstructed, you know, and you could go listen to a Casey and the Sunshine Band record, just isolate the horns. And go, okay, what are they doing on the stabs?
Exactly.
And
I think this is absolutely true. I mean, you can do a lot. I think that if you've actually played the instrument, obviously you can get. It's more easier to get close to what it really sounds like than if you didn't. I mean, that's obvious. But, you know, we're in a situation, obviously, where you can't play every single instrument. So,
want to do some Q&A?
Sure.
I'm scanning to see. Okay, guys, feed us some questions. I always hate this, like 15, 20-second delay. Feels like an eternity.
All right. Anyway, so I'm going to play the...
Oh, you got one more?
No, I'm just going to play the context one more time.
Okay.
Now that we have the... The bass is real on this. Everything else is done in the box, other than the singer, obviously.
Who's in the bag?
The drums, I did a lot of research to, you know, to make sure I got all those little hits right.
Somebody asked if you ever allow other people to watch you work. I'm thinking we could build like a fishbowl. You could be like a zoo display.
I have done it on occasion, yeah, sure. I mean, you know, one friend of mine once said, I just want to come over and take you to lunch and then just watch you work for 2 hours.
Wow.
And I said, sure.
Very cool.
I can't do that for everybody, obviously. But we were actually thinking, I was actually thinking of doing some kind of a thing at the rally once that you know, like write a cue or something more interesting to me than the 5
Let's do it.
I mean, it might be fun.
I'm trying to do a bunch of different stuff this year at the rally. I'm actually going to trim the fat on the classes this year. We just had too many. The last 2 years, there were so many classes. So we actually took note of classes that people said, not really that great, or the teacher spent more time talking about him or herself than actually teaching us. So we're eliminating some of those, and this year's rally is going to be a little more, maybe even a lot more interactive than previous road rallies. So I'm excited about that. Trying to put together a spotting session right now where I get a show producer, TV producer who's not a musical person, and the music supervisor and the editor to sit there and spot a scene from a show. So that I want our members to start thinking not like a musician, but like the people who are going to use the music from the musicians. I think it'll help them become better. Yeah. So I think that'd be great if you could do a piece live. Okay, do you use orchestral loops? Somebody asked.
No.
Okay. How important is EQ? Which is a question I was thinking. How often, because the samples just sound so amazingly good, do you ever really have to EQ anymore?
I do EQ stuff, yeah, absolutely. Not so much orchestral stuff, maybe. But certainly on something like this, I would make sure that, you know, I would always have a song that in my head that the mix of this needs to come close to, and so I will definitely go like, does this brass need more bite, or does it need less bite, or what does it need, and what doesn't, you know, the trumpet you can hear, the drums you could hear that side stick, it's really sticking out, and that's exactly what those records sound like.
And frankly, to me, the bass sounded like crap, but I remember from my days at Criteria, that's what a real reggae
the bass is very like dirty, you know, and yeah, so it's absolutely I absolutely do EQ stuff, but I think probably more on the when I do contemporary stuff, I probably use more EQ than if I just do a big orchestral stuff. I mean, they spend a lot of time making that sound good and using
Oh, yeah,
expensive
yeah.
mics, and so a lot of times you don't have to do a great deal of EQ.
I think that a lot of our members that get busted by the screeners, they've used an expensive library. They maybe even have a reasonably good skill set in using it, and the screeners will say it sounds synthy. It's because they boosted 5K on
Yeah,
the
that's
strings to make them
possible.
pop, and it
That's
just a
possible.
little bit of EQ on a really good sample can be
I
a
mean,
very
you should
dangerous
always
thing.
listen to, like I said, you should always listen to what you're trying to model. If you're trying to sound like Audio Machine, the big trailer, one of the big trailer houses, listen to what their stuff sounds like. If you're trying to sound like, a specific type of movie or something, well, then just try to make them sound like that. And a lot of times you'll find that real strings in film scores don't sound very bright at all. They are usually quite subdued sounding.
Yeah.
Unless it's some kind of an action scene. But so we gotta always like listen to what the sound that we're going after, not just think we already know it in our heads, but actually listen to a recording of, if you're trying to do something that sounds like the soundtrack from Twister, well, then go and listen to what that sounds like
It's gonna
in the
be-
beginning. But when Mark Mancina did that like really sort of heroic Western sounding thing when they're driving through the fields.
Yeah.
Like, what does that really sound like? And then try to make your stuff sound like that. I mean, that's always what you want to do.
Yeah, EQ is a dangerous weapon, whether you're doing orchestral or you're doing rock or anything. If you take each instrument in solo and try and optimize it by EQing it, you add it all together and it just doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
Bring all the faders up to zero, and just get a very rough mix and go, okay, what's not working?
I mean, to tell you the honest truth, I probably use very little EQ when I do, even when I do pop stuff. Generally speaking, I'm certainly not going to go put EQ on everything, on every
Right.
channel, 4 bands, boost there, cut there. Certainly not at all. I mean, I go and I just listen to, and I go like, what does it need? Does this vocal need to pop out a little bit more, or what?
We had, last week's show, we had Ronan Chris Murphy on, who's great, and people were talking about multi-band compression, and I could see it in his eyes. Like, why bother?
It's actually
overkill.
funny to think Rob's like that too. Ask Rob Chiarelli
Yeah.
about multi-band
Yeah.
compression. He's like, I don't need that shit,
Yeah.
You just need that if you don't know what you're doing.
I hang out with Rob in his studio. It's amazing. Almost everything he does is in the box, and nothing is dramatic there. He's not a big smoke and mirrors guy. With him, it's more about arrangement and good taste. He's all about taking parts out so that the featured part is
And
there.
also just the vibe. I mean, what is working? Like, if you recorded it properly, there's already so much good stuff to work with. I mean, that's when his class at the that he teaches at the rally. When he brings in some of those things in and he solos some of these records. I mean, you just hear it's already good. You don't really have to do that much if it's good.
It's all about the parts and the players.
Oh, that's another thing. I mean, when I do get people, when I do need singers or when I do need players, then I get people that really smoke. I mean, that are really, really good people. I don't get like crappy people because.
And are they all local, or do you use people down?
I'll totally use people from everywhere.
Okay.
Oh, I do use people from everywhere. It's nowadays you really don't have to be local. There's advantages of doing stuff in the studio live with people there because you can give them immediate feedback, and it can be a little less tedious than having somebody in Timbuktu sending you something and you're going, "Oh, that's not what I want."
Right.
But the other good thing is that the good thing about working with people remotely is that they can be working while you're working. So more can be like I could be working on the arrangement of this track, putting a bass in, do this and that, and the other guy can be recording his vocals at the same time. Well, if he has to come to my studio, then I'm just recording his vocals, you know, and don't do anything else.
You can have 3 guys working.
Yeah, and also another thing is a lot of times what's good is when with time zones, you know, they be working while you're sleeping and vice versa, so you can get stuff done quicker. If need be.
My friend Elad with his company StudioPros.com, almost all the players are Israelis. And so while Americans are sleeping, the Israeli A-list session players who are incredibly good are playing this stuff. You can wake up the next morning and do a finished track.
Yes, exactly.
Quite simple and
Oh,
brilliant.
it definitely helps. Nowadays, a lot of possible to work with people remotely.
Well, you're inspiring a lot of people that are going to go record when the show's over.
That's good.
Somebody asked a question about, do you ever group instruments together and then send them as a group out to reverb or delay or whatever effects?
Sure.
So you don't just,
like
you're not taking
on this brass section right here on this reggae track. I'm sure I had that group together. I'm sure I had the whole brass group together, and I sent it to a bus. And then I put some plate on it. I probably put some like compression, you know, like some probably LA4 or LA2A probably. Yeah. Because it's good on sustainy stuff.
Everything.
But yeah, so probably put that, you know, on that group, and then it gels it together more, you know. And you put some reverb or something else on it, and it just gels it together. So yeah, groups absolutely, especially for, you know, for this type of thing, or for drums, or, you know, definitely use groups a lot. Background vocals.
If you ever get your hands on a DBX 160, not the 160X, but the DBX 160, the original.
I've never gotten my hands on one. Only I have one in the box. I have a UAD.
Greatest.
I love that thing.
Yeah, it was so underrated at the time. I had a pair of real ones in my studio in Florida, and everybody laughed at me. It's like, no, I love those. First of all, on like disco horns, nothing better.
Oh, I love that thing. I use it a lot.
So fast.
I use it on a lot of stuff. I like that one absolutely, and you can get a lot of different sounds out of it. You can get it like to really squash, but you can also get it to be really subtle, and I love that thing. That was another thing. It's really cheap. I bought it like UAD. They always have it on sale because I think it's the same thing. Nobody wants that thing. So whenever they have a sale, it's like half off. And I'm using that thing all the time. Awesome.
Good to know somebody else out there likes it. Clyde Roberts says he's got 2. Yay, Clyde. All right. Wow, we've been going an hour and 40 minutes. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm not sure if we're doing a show next Monday or not. I think people are taking Friday off work this Friday for July 4th weekend, but businesses are going to be open on Monday. We'll keep you posted on that. Matt, I can't thank you enough for putting this together. I know some of it was left over from the Road Rally, you know, from 2 or 3 years ago, but I think this was highly educational. I hope it is, and I hope that you guys learned something. So when you get back critiques from the screeners that say, it sounded synthy, or the strings didn't sound that great, and you're going, yeah, but I used the same library he did. There's a difference, and now we know what it is.
You do have to do something with it.
Yep. Thank you very, very much.
Sure.
Thank you guys for watching. Oops, volume there on my box. See you guys next week, I think. Bye-bye.